welcome to our talk on AI in healthcare, unlocking the power of AI in healthcare. Let me start by introducing myself and then my colleague here. My name is Tanuj Gupta. I am a physician and a computer scientist with Philips Corporation, and I lead a team of operational informatics folks that includes a focus on AI. I have now been in the Kingdom of Saudi for 12 hours. This is my first visit ever to the country. So normally I reserve the thank you till the end. I feel compelled to say thank you up front. The hospitality and the people have been amazing. So I hope to continue to come to Saudi, especially when it becomes the center of AI innovation like we see today. Mohammed, please.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. It's great to be with my colleague Tanuj today, and welcome to Saudi. My name is Mohammed Al-Hamid. I'm the director of the Center of Healthcare Intelligence at King Faisal Specialist Hospital, where we run AI and machine learning for the best of humanity, I believe. Prior to my role, I was the AI and machine learning lead in IBM US and also in Canada in Toronto Lab Warden. I was coming from the software engineering domain, have no prior knowledge about what this medical field looks like, but been one exciting year already.
Great. So I'm hoping our time together is going to be very interactive. So I'm going to start with the first question of the day is, how many of you are in the healthcare industry in the audience? Just a show of hands. Okay, a lot of you. And how many are listening to this presentation and are not from healthcare? There are some. Okay, good. So that helps. So we'll make sure we address both sides of that audience. What we're going to do, let me walk you through objectives. Can we advance the slide? If somebody can click through. Oh, perfect. Okay, so we've got a few objectives. We're going to go through and ask some questions of you, especially those of you in healthcare. But you're free to also ask questions about the questions we're asking you. So there's no real rules. It's really open for us to discuss. But what we'll cover is what are some of the benefits of big data, machine learning, and AI in healthcare? What are some of the risks? And how do we practically move forward with AI in healthcare? Now, before we start that, I want to give you a little bit of background. Why is healthcare interested in AI? Back in 2015, I was consulting for hospitals, and the big technology was still electronic health records. And most customers were still saying, physicians, I'm happy with paper records. I don't want your technology, leave me alone. Now, just in 5 or 6 years, the demand has changed. Doctors and nurses are saying, give me the AI now. Go faster. So what's driving that? I'm going to just for some background, give you 4 reasons why that's happening, and then we'll get into the questions. So number 1, we had a major event, worldwide event, COVID-19. And COVID-19 drove very significant changes in the adoption of technology in healthcare. I'm listing 3, and you probably can think of more than just these 3. The first is site-neutral care delivery. So what this means is the pandemic forced us to take care of patients in their home, which caused an explosion in the amount of telemedicine that's being used and the amount of remote patient monitoring devices that are being used. Now imagine if I'm a patient and I'm wearing a Holter monitor and it's watching my heart. Now all of a sudden there's a lot of continuous streaming data that needs to be interpreted by clinicians. But most clinicians in most countries are already overworked. So who is going to read all of that data and look for the signal? It's going to be software, it's going to be AI. And so you can see that is driving the push there. The second is supply chain forecasting. We also had this problem globally, that we were running out of labor and non-labor resources. And by non-labor resources, I mean personal protective equipment, ventilators. So we didn't have systems to predict whether hospitals are going to run out of resources and be able to staff accordingly. Now, interestingly, in other industries, for those of you not in healthcare, we can predict the weather with some certainty and then plan accordingly. We can predict earthquakes and then plan accordingly. We're not able to predict shortages of people and supplies in healthcare yet. So it must be that we have to now tackle this problem, and this is driving AI in healthcare and big data. And the third is there's now policies coming in government that says records must be interoperable, data must be interoperable in healthcare, and that itself is going to drive adoption of AI and machine learning. A second big trend is value-based care. Now, in Saudi, Mohammed, what kind of system is it here in Saudi, the healthcare system?
Yeah, so in Saudi, it's a universal healthcare where the government is responsible to provide the healthcare for all the citizens. It's been challenging for the Ministry of Health and for all the hospitals to keep up the level of quality and maintaining that in the long run.
Okay.
So there were lots of challenges around that, but now with the commitment that delivering the best high healthcare possible, a lot of hospitals are now transferring to be non-profit organizations, including this King Faisal Hospital.
Good. So whether you are a 4-care system globally or you are like the Saudi system, everybody is saying we must share the risk. We must change. In a fee-for-service world, every healthcare intervention generates revenue, regardless of the outcome. And we must change to where every healthcare intervention is a cost. You pay for the cost up front, and you're accountable for the result. So just like in the Saudi system, then you try to prioritize preventive care, self-care, community care, and try to keep people out of the hospital. Well, one way you can keep people out of the hospital is try to predict diseases earlier and earlier and screen for them, and those are going to be AI tools as well. Just briefly, we know that as a percentage of gross domestic product in every country, healthcare is rising. This is forcing hospitals to come together, to pool their resources, and to become more efficient. The need to be efficient with healthcare resources also drives the adoption of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and big data. And the fourth trend, before we get to our first question here, is this data is now growing as an asset. And I think every industry, including healthcare, recognizes there's something here. Sometimes you've heard data is the new oil or data is the new blood in healthcare. Sometimes I like to say, and I'll bring that analogy back, there's some asset there, there's some learning we can do, and just the sheer volume of data we're collecting is now pushing us to adopt AI. So this is going to be our first question. I'm going to start with you, Mohammed. What are some ways you believe, or at King Faisal, big data, machine learning, AI could positively impact healthcare?
All right, so it's an interesting question. So when it comes to AI and machine learning, there are 3 aspects that we can adopt those technologies in the clinical settings, in the administrative settings, or in the operational side of the process. So on the clinical settings, yes, absolutely, AI can, based on investment and bringing up the technology closer to diagnoses, to treatment recommendations, and also to follow up on the prescriptions, side effects analysis, and all of that. In the administrative process, today, the hospital, for example, takes 300 x-rays in a week. That's a huge amount of x-rays that can be analyzed by radiologists. If we have to do that manually, one by one, and first come, first serve, then we will not pay attention to those who need really the right attentions. So with simple diagnoses and prioritizations kind of process, AI can contribute into prioritizing those abnormality x-rays, for example, in comparison with the normal ones. The final aspect, which is the operational. Pharmaceutical industry, clinical trials, all of that kind of domains have a lot of interest in using AI and model. Our experience in the King Faisal hospitals is adopting those kind of technologies, and we can discuss more in the next slides.
One thing I'm struck, Mohammed, because I just met you today. How long have you been with King Faisal?
Only been there for 1 year.
1 year. And were you in healthcare before that?
No, software engineering background.
That's right. So incredible that he's been 1 year in healthcare and he's already picking up on these trends. So the question now for the audience, anybody with healthcare experience or even without who's got an opinion, what do you think are some of the benefits of AI in healthcare? Just show of hands and we'll bring a microphone to you. I see one over there in the back.
Improved quality of care improvements?
Quality of care improvements, yeah. And can I ask where your name and where you're from?
I'm Brian. I am from the United States, but I live in Dubai.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So Brian said to improve the quality of care. Right. So that's a big one. What about here? Yes, woman here. Please speak in a microphone that everybody can hear your question. Thank you.
Hi. Thanks for the question. I'm a family physician at King Faisal Specialist Hospital, so it's
Okay.
great to know that such initiatives are taking place at the hospital that I'm
Right.
based at. So the benefits are endless. I would like just to take the focus of community health,
Yeah.
moving away from hospital-centered healthcare towards community-based healthcare system.
Yep.
And so supporting physicians in preventive aspects, in annual physical health system, in the model of care, which is basically aligned with the Vision 2030 that we are moving towards. So just a quick on top of my head, things that I can mention, and the list is endless.
Yeah, and your comment and the gentleman's comment are linked, because in order to do more preventative care and to incentivize for preventative care versus hospital care, we need to measure quality improvement to make sure I'm not just getting paid to intervene, I'm getting paid to improve the patient's lives, and I have a way to measure that. Excellent. Yeah. Others, yes. Over here. There's, I think, 2 or 3 in this area. Okay, you're next.
Thank you very much. This is Syed from Digital Corporation Organizations. I have a background in healthcare industry as well. So basically, in COVID-19, this is the best, I think, the lesson learned that when the COVID arrived and many countries suffering from exactly what are the treatment, and because it's affect the lungs, and there is no mechanism to diagnose these x-rays of the people, so what exactly they are affected. So it's basically when you have a large massive amount of big data and you need some quick decisions. So I think AIs can perform a critical role. And of course, I agree with you, the data is the fuel of AI, and if you have no data, so you have a less chance to get the benefits of AI. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We saw a proliferation of AI algorithms to screen for COVID-19. So there was a lot of interest in that when it first came out. Yes.
Hi, my name is Abdurrahman Sabbagh, emergency physician with background in healthcare simulation. Shortly, I think analyzing automation of tasks and analyzing big patient data sets I strongly believe it might help in decreasing the cost and deliver the patient care fast in a smarter way. That's what I would say in the benefits of AI.
Yeah, good. Automation, so you mentioned automation, which we haven't heard yet, and that's a big one. And then decreasing the cost, so similar to what you said, Mohammed, where if there's too many images to scan, there's a lot of cost, that you can take out if you can use AI for some of that.
I'll give you just a simple example. So in KFSH, it's a universal healthcare. So when a patient misses their appointment, basically it's a loss of revenue to the hospital, because that's an opportunity for another patient to come and visit the doctor. So what we did is a simple algorithms that predict the possibility that every single patient will miss their appointment. Within only 3 months, we were able to save the hospital over 20 millions, only because we used the right data to estimate the possibility that the patient will miss their appointment.
Fantastic. Yes, please.
Yes, hi everyone. Hawazin Badawi, applied AI assistant professor, and my background in how to utilize technology for healthcare. What I see is applying the AI and machine learning in the healthcare area will support the proactive and increasing the user experience and enhancing the awareness to be proactive, not reactive, or patient looking for the healthcare services. And right now, our interest, because in our lab in Canada, we're focusing on developing digital twins for health and well-being. And this is a big field that we can use it,
Yeah, so you bring up patients directly, and I think there was an algorithm. I used to work for an EHR company, and we looked at, can you tell a patient with asthma that they're gonna have an exacerbation before they have to go to the ER? And the benefits of that and the cost reduction is big. Yeah, excellent. Let's take one more, and then we'll move to the next question. Yes, this gentleman here.
Thank you. Dr. Mahmoud from King Salman Ahmed Farsi Hospital. I think one of the main advantages for AI in healthcare that improve patient safety, like in pharmacy, duplication in medication, dose for the patient. It's one of the main advantage of healthcare, of AI in healthcare.
Yeah, to improve patient safety. That's a big one. Yeah, and we're going to talk about patient safety actually in the risk section. So that's great. So I'm gonna show you now a slide about what I've thought about, what we've thought about at the company I work for in terms of benefits to the health system. This is not everything. As somebody said, it could be endless. But and I represent a lot of imaging technology. So of course I looked at imaging first, and it said reconstruction algorithm. So if I can create the image with less exposure to the patient of radiation, and then that is a patient safety benefit. And that is also, if I can improve the quality of the image for better detection of tumors, then that's also a benefit diagnostically. Clinically, screening. So can I do early screening? There's a lot of investment, especially in the oncology space, to say, can I pick up a tumor faster than the human eye can pick it up? So a little bit personal story. My mother has stage 3 lung cancer, and we found it incidentally. She broke some ribs, and on the chest x-ray, they discovered it 2.5 years ago. Most lung cancers are found by accident like that. And Mohammed, in your example, if they went in for a routine chest x-ray and we had a battery of AI algorithms to just screen for a whole bunch of disease, and even maybe detect cancer at stage 1 or even before stage 1, where the AI could see the difference in the pixel density more than the human eye, I mean, imagine the benefits we would have for everybody that way. Diagnostic assistance, and then pathway selection for treatment. So you could use AI to say, hey, choose path A or path B for the most likely success for the patient. And then we talked about operational and financial insights. So automation was the word that this gentleman used. Can we automate report creation and reduce the burden on the care team so that they can do more or spend more time with the patients? Can we automate some of the revenue cycle or payment pieces? And then patient engagement, I think, was mentioned here as well. Can we automate some of that? So I think we've covered a lot of these. Again, it can be endless, but this is good. Let's now flip and talk about the other side. And if you saw the opening comments today when the conference kicked off, there was the phrase responsible AI. That's the essence of this question, the spirit of this question. What are some of the risks we might see with data, ML, and AI? Mohammed, have you thought about this?
All right. It's a big topic. I don't know if you have heard the opening sessions. There was one specific session talks about adversarial attacks and how specific pixels adjusted to the image could convert the classification from what is supposed to be predicted into something completely off. So this is really critical. It's not from the security point of view, but from the quality point of view. Can we trust the data that's being used in the AI model? Can we trust the model to provide the right prediction, right accuracy when it comes to the outcome of the model that's supposed to be done? You mentioned a few minutes ago, Tanuj, that we can use AI for automation. For example, I can relate one small example. We have physicists, they see patients, they try to annotate the tumor in the brain. So that's a long process. It takes 5 business days to do one simple case. And doing that is they segment the tumor in the brain and they calculate the total volume in order to determine the doses for the chemotherapy, for example, or for radiation therapy. Automation can be done more efficiently in comparison with the study that we have been doing. It's more accurate. It can tell you the volume of the tumor in the brain much precisely than just manually editing it using the physicist who or he or she can see a patient in 1 week.
But now, in the spirit of the risk question, so I mean that's a huge benefit, but there's risk to that if the algorithm's not calibrated correctly. There's patient safety risk, right? Yeah, good. Okay.
So that's the question: is can we trust the AI to do that job, or human?
Yeah.
So that's a big question.
Okay, gotcha. So let's go to the audience. What are some of the risks you think about when you think about AI applied in healthcare? And even if you're not in healthcare, it's okay. Yes, this woman over here in the front. Yeah. It's okay to answer if you're not in healthcare. There's no right or wrong answers. This is all for discovery and learning.
Hi, assalamu alaikum. Arwa Baidit from King Abdulaziz University. So I'm a radiologist. So when you tell me what are the concerns, I am concerned that I'm going to be jobless in the next 20 years. So this is a huge concern for a lot of the clinicians or the radiologists that are working. We understand that AI is going to help us tremendously, and I want AI to come and help me with imaging appropriateness, teasing out who's the x-rays that I should be taking care of right now. But when it comes to the other side of things, oh, by the way, tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to be jobless. So that's like, what am I going to do?
Yeah, good. Good. So you already took us to question 4, which is the technology going to replace clinicians? But this is good. Let's talk about it. It comes up a lot. Now, historically, I'm going to give you this because I had this conversation in the car on the way to this conference last night. The same concerns were there with computers in general. When the personal computer started coming out, people thought these computers are going to replace jobs. And what they did is the jobs evolved, but it made us it gives us more freedom. We would not be able to work from home during COVID without computers. So I think similarly, right now, my tools to treat a patient, I've got 5 tools. I've got, or to diagnose a patient. I've got taking a history, so speaking with them. I've got physical exam. I have taking vital signs. I have taking lab tests, blood-based lab tests, and I have imaging. Those are the 5 tools I have to diagnose a patient. Well, what we're talking about is the birth of a 6th tool, an AI algorithm, that can look across all 5 of those and find a pattern we didn't detect. So what I would argue, I hope, is that this is a 6th diagnostic tool. And so I can imagine how many chest x-rays and CT brains you've read. Those are the 2 most common images in radiology. If those could be read by AI and you can focus on the more interesting images, it would just be different. And I think somebody on stage said it best. I think it was the CEO of Sadaya who said, AI will not replace clinicians, but clinicians who don't use AI will be outdated. That you must start to use it as a tool. Good. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that. That's good. Other questions or other responses to this? Yes, in the back. Then I'll come to this side, I promise.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abid Al-Badr. I'm a dentist, faculty in College of Dentistry, but also entrepreneur in health technology. I think one of the concerns is who is responsible when there is an issue that happens as a result of diagnosing using that 6th tool. But also, when are we going to have the decision made by the doctors? It's easier to give the doctor that responsibility and consequences. But if it was the system, then it's different.
Good, good. Yeah, and this is what I'm hoping is this is a mix of sort of questions and responses. So let's talk about that for a minute. And Mohammed, I'd love for you to weigh in too if you've come across this. I take it from a legal perspective. So who is accountable for the practice or malpractice of a medical decision I make, given that I'm using a certain tool? So as a clinician, for example, if I get a high potassium value from a blood sample, I am trained as a clinician to ask, how long has that blood been sitting? If it's been sitting for several hours, that's a false positive. And if it hasn't, then that's a real signal. Or I might take a second potassium level. So I am liable for the practice decision made from using this tool because the tool is supposedly calibrated. Now, if the tool is not calibrated, if the lab machine is not calibrated, then the machine is liable. And we saw this real example with the company Theranos. So that company said, hey, we can do 500 tests from a sample of blood. They were giving incorrect results. They were liable. So the results have to be correct from the tool, and then the clinician has some liability based on how they use the tool to make a diagnosis. So it's going to be shared. The reason the tool is trusted is it's also regulated. And that's going to be our 3rd question, is to talk about the regulations. I don't know if you've got any thoughts in this space.
So it is a really good question. At least what we believe in the King Faisal Hospital is that AI should be an assistive tool, should be always an assistive tool. We believe that it's not our job to replace radiologists at all. Our job is to provide the right healthcare at the right time with the efficient allocation of resources. If we're going to wait for a patient a couple of days until all that process of diagnosis has to complete, then that 5 days matters for a patient with a cancer. Today, we sat down with a specialist in the oncology clinics, and we always have those questions. There are patients who ask for chemotherapy where the chances of surviving is very minimal. Is that an ethical question? They will go back to the family and says that the surviving percentage or probability is very low. Family will insist that they want to go with the therapy anyway. They wanted to use AI as an evidence tool. Should we invest AI to do that? That's an ethical question, right? So that's in a community as a physician. I'm not a physician, but I think that's a community where they need to decide whether the technology should be involved in that process or no.
Very good. I promise to come to this side, so there's a couple hands here. If we can bring the mics to this side. So let's say we'll take 3 more, because I saw 3 hands, and then we'll go to the next question. This gentleman in the black suit. No luck.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Yeah.
I'm a master's student, civil engineering from KFUPM. So what I want to say actually is that when it comes to the issue of healthcare, we need to look into explainability of AI, because whereby when we use artificial neural network to predict, we don't actually know what goes on inside the neural network. So we need more to be able to make decisions.
Yeah, so you're getting to explainability or interpretability, and I think that's a big issue. So a lot of concern is I'm going to get flooded with data as a clinician, or I'm going to get flooded with all of these AI results, and I need to explain it. I would suggest that we have systems already that we could leverage. So for example, there are hundreds and thousands of lab tests we could order. But the way I make lab tests explainable is I say there's a value, and then there's a normal range. And if it's abnormal, then I know how to act, high or low. Well, couldn't AI be the same? If it's based on data versus blood, who cares? If I've got a value and I've got a normal range, will that make it explainable or interpretable? There hasn't been enough thinking about that yet, but yeah, I agree with you. That's a big area. Yes?
Hello, this is Haidar Mubarak from the Saudi Electronic University. One concern is the bias of the data set used to train the algorithms. Because I worked in melanoma detection using dermoscopy images, and most of the images there are from Caucasian patients. So when we take that system and deploy it somewhere else, it might not give us the what we hoped for as a result.
Yeah, I think there was a Nature article, so I'm glad you brought up bias. There was a Nature article maybe a year or 2 ago that said a lot of the AI algorithms at that time, 1 or 2 years ago, was trained on data that was 90% European white male. So it doesn't necessarily apply to every category. The pharmaceutical industry has been dealing with this. I used to work for a pharmaceutical company, AstraZeneca, that introduced Iressa, which was a cancer drug that worked really well in the Japanese, but did not work well elsewhere. So there was even a financial situation. Do we invest in this drug when it doesn't work in our major markets? And they found a way for it to work. But I think with AI, the cost profile is different. And so there's a potential to treat multiple cultures, multiple geographies, localities with different versions. But we have to make sure we're not doing it in a biased way. One more, and then we'll move to the next one. Yes.
Thank you so much. This is Nawaf Al-Bali, healthcare lead from Accenture, Saudi. One of the interesting and puzzling elements and risks related to AI in healthcare is yes, bias, but it speaks to a larger issue, which is the generalizability of AI. Meaning, if I find an AI model that has been deployed somewhere with a 96% accuracy, how can we be so sure that this accuracy is achieved in the Saudi or in the Arab population? So that this is the generalizability issue is something that we really need to look into.
I've got some thoughts. Have you any thoughts on generalizability?
Yeah, absolutely. I think lots of interesting keywords. We have been hearing explainability, generalizations, building transparent data for feeding the AI models for training. I think to touch on all of those, I think the number one is that we need to build up local capabilities from the healthcare itself. So it's not we're going to wait for the technology to arrive at the hospital, but we have to understand the technology ahead of time. So going back into the generalization, I think AI was designed to do one task, and it has to do that task efficiently. And what we are jumping into right now is that we are building this generic AI that's good enough for the diagnosis of this disease for all type of patients who've been trained in the US or in the Europe. I think that's a big issue. That's why we believe in King Faisal Hospital to the aim and the vision of the centers that we need to build up the trust, build up the capacity when it comes to data, and also the infrastructure needed to drive really solutions powered by AI.
So my comment on generalizability, I think that's the case in other tests, but I think one of the profound things about AI for me is that we could make it more localized if we invest in infrastructure to track the software. So for non-healthcare people, I'm going to draw the analogy to our favorite AI company to do that with is Tesla, right? And I would argue that Tesla's self-driving technology must be localized because there are certain rules and regulations in different countries that are different. So if there's a Tesla in the UK and a Tesla in the US and a Tesla in Saudi, they must be localized for those regions. And they are using software infrastructure to manage those versions and those localizations. I think the same is probably true for healthcare, but there must be an investment in the let's call it DevOps, the deployment monitoring infrastructure, right? I think we've covered, I've got the clicker. I was saying next slide, but I've got the clicker. I think we've covered most of these. So we said patient safety risk. If you're not calibrated or over-predicting or under-predicting, you could cause harm. Model accuracy drift. So as the data changes, if I took a lab test, if I took your temperature, your body temperature doesn't drift so much. Maybe over 100 years, the body temperature has drifted. But if I'm taking a test, a lab test based on the data in your chart, that data changes minute by minute. So it's going to drift out of accuracy, and you have to keep those algorithms calibrated. We talked about bias, data security and privacy, which we understand from other industries, and then uninterpretable AIs. That gets to explainability. So I think we hit a lot of the risks. Let's get to our third question, which is what type of regulatory issues, if any, do we anticipate around machine learning and AI in healthcare? So to put it in context, also on my flight over to this conference, I sat next to the CEO of the company that is serving the robotic coffee outside. Fascinating conversation. We're going to have a healthcare conversation in the future. So it's another good thing about this conference is bringing some of us together. But their regulatory issues are different than healthcare. So what are we anticipating in healthcare? Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think, and I do believe, that healthcare is complicated. That's because there is a process. There is a clinical process involved. So when I say, for example, I need the lab test to be arrived in order for the model to estimate the length of stay, for example, then we have to go back to the process. Whereas these labs have been taken, is it 24 hours prior to the admission? Is it within the admission? Is it within 10 hours of the admission? That's really complicated because it's not about the data, it's about the understanding the process. So honestly, from a machine learning background, I found that the data is associated with the context. And if you don't understand the context, then the data is irrelevant. So when it comes to regulations now, we can regulate and we can do a lot of licensing to the AI models. We can tell that this AI model is responsible and it's accurate. But the usage of the AI models has no kind of regulations because we have to know when and what and how, and do the people who use the AI model are trained to use it in the proper way.
Fair. Okay, good. So yeah, the way you use it, right, there could be a lot of variation in the way you use it. What about in the audience? What do you think about regulations and AI in healthcare? Either your thoughts about it or questions. Somebody in the back there. Yep. Way in the back. Yeah. Perfect.
Will it treat it like a medical product, some of the AI? Will it go to the clinical trials? Which one will go to clinical trials? Which one will not be?
Yeah, good. That is exactly what my next slide shows. So you're right. Could it be treated as a medical device that requires clinical trials? So I would argue yes, it could. It could also not be. It depends on how invasive it is. So we could talk about different styles. But do we agree, I guess, that regulation is required with these devices? I think I'm seeing heads nodded. Are there examples of devices? Yes, somebody here. Examples of devices that don't require regulations, that are healthcare devices? 1 second, Mike. Yep, so we can all hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Hi. I think we have a great example from the HIPAA regulations that give more privacy and idea about the AI and machine learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's referencing HIPAA regulations, which are regulations in the U.S. that have guidance around personal health information. That's right.
Exactly.
And then the regulatory bodies, so the Food and Drug Administration in the U.S., and then in Europe it's the GDPR process.
And
right.
also they have for the consumer is the CCPA.
Okay.
And the next year they will active the CPRA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I used to ask this question, but the landscape has changed. The answer is yes, it has to be regulated. And there are now 300 or 400 AI diagnostic algorithms globally out there, at least 300 or 400. And they're all now going through getting FDA approval for the US, GDPR approval for Europe, all of these approvals. And so it's similar to the question that was asked on this side of the room is, how do you know who's liable for the practice or malpractice? Well, if the device is less explainable, then it must be regulated. And there has to be possibly some generalizability. There's some challenges with regulating AI, especially if you're localizing different versions. But yes, regulation is coming. So because the answer is a little bit obvious, we must regulate, I'm going to walk you through how I think AI diagnostics are very similar to the pharmaceutical and device market. So real briefly, if you can see today, and this gets to the other question we had when we asked, is this going to replace me? Well, it's a new tool. Today, if I want to treat a patient with chemistry, I package that in a pill, then I distribute that to a pharmacy, and the patient then ingests or injects the medicine. Well, today I can also treat you with physical hardware. I might package that in a pacemaker, I might distribute it to a surgical center, and the surgeon then implants it into the body. Well, what we are saying is coming now with AI software is the ability to diagnose or treat you with software. It must be packaged in something. So what does packaging mean in software? It means it's wrapped in a way that it's not dependent on the software that was used to build it. It can move around. It's contained in something. And then I have to distribute it either into the radiology workflow, where it can help with diagnosis, or the electronic health workflow, electronic health record workflow, where it can help with treatment, or to your personal device on your iPhone or your Android, where it can go direct to the consumer for preventative side. So these are new tools that are coming. Before I get into this, how do you actually see it come to market? Because somebody asked about clinical trials. Any thoughts about this comparison to pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, I think it's tough. At least from our experience in King Faisal Hospital is that, again, we're going to use AI as an assistive tool. The clinical trials has a lot of randomness on the selection of the samples, etc. Yes, there are criteria, there are selection categories, there are specific profiling of every single patient. But we have seen a lot of investment when it comes to AI and a lot of outcomes when it comes to selecting the right population of patients who will likely be the right patients to be involved in that case. So if you see the clinical trials, for instance, only a few cases passed the level 3, and that's due to the fact that it's either the selection at the beginning was too complicated or wasn't the right population that drives the outcomes. And I believe if we go back all the way again, selection and analyzing the patterns of data and thousands of patient profiles in the database, I think that will be done using machine learning in a few seconds.
Yeah. So I'm going to convince you and everybody, hopefully, in the next few minutes, that there are a lot of parallels to pharmaceuticals. And you're right, not everything needs a clinical trial. So I had asked that question earlier. I'll give you an example of an AI application in healthcare that does not require clinical trials or even regulation. So there is a diet and nutrition application, an app on the phone called Noom, N-O-O-M. So what they do is they provide an app where you track your food, and they have a counselor that is watching what you track, and then that counselor can weigh in and counsel you on different food habits. There's no medical intervention. There is a competitor called Calibrate that includes medication. That one is regulated, obviously, because it includes medication. But even in the one that's unregulated, if you say, for example, I am binge eating, they will check and say, do you mean binge as in a medical diagnosis of a binge disorder? And that's where they stop. And if that's a yes, then they refer you to a doctor. But if you mean it in a casual way, that I ate too much, then they continue. So because they are very careful on drawing the line between going into something that a licensed professional would do and not, then they are unregulated. But when you cross the line into what a licensed professional would do, you start to get regulated. Now, I would argue that creating software AI in healthcare much closer to drug development processes than software processes. And I'm gonna walk you through that now. These are hard to read, so I'll talk you through it. But there's usually 5 places that you invest in to bring a pharmaceutical or a medical device to market. You invest in discovery and development, you invest in regulatory, you invest in operations, marketing and sales, and then medical affairs. In the discovery development phase, you start with either animal studies or small bench studies, and then you test it and you say, is there a signal here worth pursuing, a signal of efficacy that is relatively safe? And if so, you go to development, which means you test it broader. And you test it, if it's clinical trials, with a safety trial, then an efficacy trial, then a safety and efficacy trial at scale. If it passes that and there's a real signal for this drug or device, now you go to regulations and you say, I need to get approval to market my claim. So you go to the FDA, as we said over here, or the European GDPR process, and then you need reimbursement. So if I'm going to continue to scale this, will insurance or will the central ministry pay for it? If you get past that hurdle, you now have to manufacture at scale. So for pharmaceuticals and physical devices, that's a physical process, and there's regulations around manufacturing process. You still have to scale, but it's different for software. Once I scale, I need to get this product out there. So typically we see in pharma and device, I advertise the brand of the product. I advertise the disease category it's in. If you've ever seen those advertisements on TV, I will offer free samples or discounts for patients who can't afford it. And then the last is almost like, we call it support in a IT organization. They call it medical affairs in a medical organization. If I have questions as a doctor about the safety or efficacy, I need a scientist to answer those questions. I might need medical education around those questions. That's the last step. So what I'm going to argue now is these are the same steps that an AI diagnostic would have to go through if it is doing something a licensed professional would do. So you would do a discovery step on a small set of training data. So, and you may go in with one thing. You may go in saying, I want to detect lupus. Lupus takes on average 6 years to diagnose. I want to diagnose it in 1 year. And I go in, and one of the things I need to find out is, do they have peripheral neuropathy, which means the nerves in my limbs and toes are decaying. So how do I detect that? And I discover if they're wearing an Apple Watch or a Fitbit and I'm watching their steps, I can actually find a signal for peripheral neuropathy. Well, in my process, I'm not going to keep developing to the spec I started with. I'm going to run with this new detection system. That's why it's closer to discovery than it is software development. Then I go to a wider set of data, hopefully not 90% white European male, but it's localized for the region. and I then look for a bigger signal. So the clinical trial in the case that you mentioned might be using data, not actual patients, but it's the equivalent of doing that to produce a data set that will get regulatory approval, reimbursement approval, and then operations is about, in our question here, deploying at scale and being able to, just like in physical product, if there's a patient safety issue, I need to recall it. How do I do a product recall on software? That has to be built into the infrastructure. Marketing and sales, we said creating awareness around the product. Free samples. So what does a free sample look like in software? Well, we've all used software that offers free trial until you're comfortable with it and then you can use it. A lot of AI startups are starting to offer free trials in order to get people to start to use their algorithms. A lot of parallels to that. And then we should anticipate we're going to need some support. I'm going to need a data scientist who can answer questions about the safety or effectiveness of this algorithm. I'm going to have independent data scientists who want to study it. I'm going to have medical education around using this algorithm. A lot of parallels. So one of the objectives was to talk about how does partnership work. Well, if I am a health system and I am a product company, we probably would partner like this. So now I'm going to ask if I convinced you that these are similar.
I think you touched on a really interesting aspect, Tanuj. I think I would just, on the discovery, but for example, today we do have a Center of Genomes, for example. We do sequence a lot of genes, over 250,000 of them. The variance between the drug's effects and the doses that's been prescribed is really phenomena. You can understand that the side effects can be proven by using a simple advanced analytics that this type of population, they react usually positively to small doses versus those kind of population where the opposite. So I think you did.
Good. So I've convinced Mohammed. I'm hoping I've convinced some of you that there's some parallels. And I think, that what I anticipate happening is we know how to deal with pharmaceuticals. And I almost anticipate now, if I'm a health system and there are 15 different chest X-ray algorithms out there, I'm going to need an AI formulary that says I'm only going to allow these 4 or 5 for cost reasons, just like we have drug formularies in health systems. The one more slide to convince you that I think this is the case is this is a company called Click Therapeutics. Now, Click Therapeutics got $47 million in investment from venture capital firms. That's on par with venture capital. But look at the investment they got from pharmaceutical companies, $800 million US, which is way more than you see in the venture capital space. But it is normal for drug companies because the clinical trial step is expensive with patients. And if you look at the image that I show up there, from their website, they are modeling their software pipeline like a drug pipeline. And their software, the first one up there, Clicatine, is a smoking cessation software app. So their claim with the FDA is that if you download the app and you're quitting smoking, using that app in the first 30 days, you're less likely to relapse than if you didn't use that app. So very similar to drug development, and they're getting funding like a drug company. So hopefully that convinces you that this is a likely model for how we see safety, efficacy being regulated for AI algorithms. Let's go to a fourth question. So we this was your question with the radiologist, yes. Will it replace clinicians or part of clinicians' role? Why or why not? Your thoughts, and then we'll open this question up not just to answering this question, but any other questions you have.
All right, I think this question is really tough to have a simple answer, but I think the technology will always be there, whether it's in the healthcare, whether it's in the other industries, including the banking, for example, because a lot of AI models today do a lot of the stock market exchange and then does all the purchases of transaction, making those transactions based on the investment. So I think the goal is, and it would be specifically in healthcare, is as an assistive tools, as I mentioned. But what is more important is that if we think about the administrative process, AI have done extremely great when it comes, for example, automating a lot of processes. Coding, for example, automation the coding and sequencing of the diagnoses is done using machine learning. When it comes, for example, the simple prioritization of surgeries. When it comes, for example, the length of stay. Today in KFSH, in King Faisal Specialist Hospital, a lot of surgeries being cancelled on the same day. That due to the unavailability of beds in ICU. Why is that? Because this surgery need a possibility to be transferred to ICU. And guess what? If we analyzed and we build up a model to estimate the length of stay for every single patient in the ICU, then there will be some kind of, at least some kind of insight to tell us that for this patient, because they need an ICU bed, then let's schedule that surgery on that day instead of that the other day. So that would save lives. Yes, we did not use it as a diagnosis tool. We did not use it as a medical tool, but I think this is where the future would be, is helping as an assistive tool rather than replacing physicians.
Yeah, let's open it up to questions, to this, your thoughts here, or even questions, any questions you have. Yes, up here, and then we'll go in the back.
Well, thank you so much for the enlightening interactive session. So I'm going to use the pandemic again. So similar to how the pandemic really highlighted and focused the importance of AI, it's the same example how people were really in need to go back to in-person interaction with their physicians. So something that a lot of patients and individuals sort of missed during the pandemic is the empathy with their physicians. So although AI has a great role in the healthcare system, but it's empathy that is really a unique component that can only be secured with the doctor-patient relationship.
Yeah, that's an important point. That we are worried about AI replacing humans, but the most human aspect is not the completing tasks part. It is the empathy and interaction with each other. So maybe, there's lots of futures possible, but maybe one positive is that it emphasizes the personal interaction more when you've got tools like this handling some of the tasks. Yeah, that's good. In the back, and then we'll come to the front.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Osama Al-Shamari from King Fahd Medical City. Now, I came to this session with a big question in my mind, and I'm hoping to look for the answer from you, especially in your position and your experience in artificial intelligence and healthcare. Now, there is no doubt that AI can bring an immense benefits to the healthcare, especially healthcare sector is very complex, where many stakeholders and players are in place. So harnessing those complex data to get unprecedented insights, it's no-brainer, definitely. And we've been talking about the benefits of AI in healthcare since, I would say, a decade from now. Now, when the COVID hits, it was a really special case in our lifetime, where all human minds, efforts, all the governments, all the funding were converged to tackle one single problem, which happens to be a health problem, the pandemic. And the eye were turned to the AI to answer one single question: when this pandemic is predicted to be, or when this pandemic will be end. And during that time, I remember there were a few efforts were circulating, or results were circulating among people that the pandemic, according to the AI-based models, it was predicted to be ends in few months, like 3 to 6 months. And personally, I had faith in this answer, because I thought we already have super powerful computers. And as I mentioned, all the efforts, all the data, all the great bright minds converge to one single problem. And obviously, AI had terribly failed to answer this question. Now, again, from your experience in AI in healthcare, and when you look retrospectively, how do you evaluate what humans have done with AI during the COVID? And another answer, another way, what was the AI role have played to that help human to overcome or tackle this kind of pandemic? Because personally, I believe there is no good answer to that. Yes.
So you raise a point that we pushed AI to help us during the pandemic, and it failed in predicting the end of the pandemic. So and I think that's correct. I think the way I would look at it is the way we look at weather prediction. We accept that weather prediction is not 100% accurate. What we accept is that when you are predicting the weather, it increases the probability of that situation occurring. So if I see that it's going to rain tomorrow, there's a high probability of rain, but there are often times when I'm surprised it doesn't rain tomorrow, or it rains earlier or after. But having the prediction is better than not having the prediction, because it gives me some sense of preparedness. I suspect the same is going to be true for things like pandemics. We know it's true for earthquakes, for hurricanes, things like that. So I think we have to adjust our expectation to say the tools we have increase the probability of something coming true, but nature's wild. I mean, we don't know. Maybe when there's, I hope there's not a lot of pandemics, but if there were, the AI could train on the variables that are in a pandemic. Maybe there's a correlation with how fast it replicates, with how long it'll take for it to go away. That's one variable I could think of. The models can get better, but I don't think we should ever expect 100%. Now, I would even argue in healthcare, we don't expect 100% predictability from blood tests today. We have a sensitivity and a specificity to every healthcare test we do. So I think we have to adjust our expectations that way. I think we said you next, and then we'll come to you. Yeah.
Thank you again. It's just a follow-up question on the framework that you have mentioned, that that AI algorithms would probably follow a similar pathway in the approvals, such as pharmaceuticals or medical device. Just wondering on the marketing aspect, on the marketing piece, your typical customers would be in the pharma or in medical devices would be your typical patients, physicians, nurses, and physician assistants. Who would be your typical customer in an AI algorithm that you're trying to push into the market?
Yeah. So it depends on the type of AI. So if it's AI for diagnosis or treatment, it's going to be the clinician. And I would argue AI diagnostics in imaging is one of the most exciting things in imaging recently. So the people you are likely selling to is going to be the radiology department. And then, I alluded to cost control. There's going to be some sort of formulary of what AI do we allow as a radiology department, what we don't allow. Now, for a company like the one I work for, we must allow all of it on our infrastructure. If you're using our packs, you should be able to download any AI algorithm that has regulatory approval in your market. So that infrastructure localization problem we mentioned, we have to work on that problem. We have no choice. But then the startup companies would be working on the best AI algorithm for, let's say, reading a CT brain, and they are trying to compete on brand and on feature set with the others. So I think it's still similar. It's going to be the clinicians. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, too many good questions. I think I will just touch on the idea of the AI, why it's failed. I think this is really important. So the key is that all the artificial intelligence today is not the super AI that can solve the problem of the world. Remember that machine learning is about analyzing historical data. And we have no precedent cases where this pandemic has started a long time ago. And the thing is, the AI today that we have is artificial intelligence, but it's weak. And what we are looking for, or what as you're referring to, is this kind of super intelligence where it can adapt different kind of domain, understand everything else. So they're giving us the sign that the time is out, so I'm going to stop at this moment, but thank you.
Okay, so time's up. We'll take your question offline when we get off stage, But again, I want to thank everybody for the time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Whether you're in healthcare or not, it's very exciting to be in AI in every field. especially healthcare. So I hope you're excited too. Thank you.